Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Now we are also available on Telegram, so join our Telegram channel by clicking on the link that is available in the description below to get the latest updates from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 12th April 2021, and the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. But before that, there is an announcement that the Quality Improvement Program for the preliminary examination of 2021 have started from Monday, that is today. And these include 50 hours of targeted course of the preliminary examination, and there will be a balance between the core and the current affairs section. And this will help you in having a targeted approach for this year's preliminary examination. The next batch will start from 3rd of May. For more details, look at the link that has been given in the description box below. With this, let's start the discussion now. Now, this article on page number 6 is related to a very crucial and important issue of data protection. And it has come into news in the context of the data breach at the MobiKwik. And this data breach is considered to be India's biggest data breach till date. And due to this, around 9.9 crore users have come at risk. And due to this, it is said that India needs a robust data protection regime which clearly defines the limits that are there on the government and the corporates to use the data or the personal data of the users. And at the same time, it is argued that such a data protection regime should clearly differentiate between the data privacy rights and the need for data security. And accordingly, recently the Government of India in 2019 had introduced the Personal Data Protection Bill in the Lok Sabha. Now, this bill has been referred to the Parliamentary Committee and its report will be submitted somewhere in the middle of the year 2021. And accordingly, the various provisions of the Data Protection Bill and its criticisms become important for us from the mains examination perspective. So let us look at some important provisions, the definitions that are there, and also what are the key areas of concern related to the Data Protection Bill that was introduced in the year 2019 in the Indian Parliament. Now, data is considered to be the new oil, and the corporates and the governments across the globe are really interested in the personal data of the users. Further, data has become an important ingredient of the Industrial Revolution 4.0. And also, there are concerns regarding digital colonization by the big corporates, which are clearly at advantage or are trying to misuse their position as far as the personal data of the users is concerned. And accordingly, the Government of India's Data Protection Bill provides for certain provisions which safeguard the rights of the individuals and at the same time also provides the corporates and the governments the right to access the personal data. Now, India formulated its data protection bill in the backdrop of one of the important judgments by the Supreme Court of India that was given in the year 2017. And this judgment was known as the Puttaswamy judgment, and it made the right to privacy as one of the fundamental rights under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. And in this backdrop, the Government of India formulated this data protection bill and introduced it in the Parliament with the view of protecting the data of the individuals and providing this right to privacy as a fundamental right to the individuals. Now, the data protection bill focuses on four important issues. First is related to data localization. That is, where is the data being stored or processed? Is it being stored in India only, or is it being stored outside India, or it is being processed in India, or is it being processed outside India? Second issue is that of consent of the individual regarding the processing of data. Third is regarding the compliance of the corporates with the government rules. And finally, the bills provide for certain exceptions. So in this regard, there are three important definitions that have been provided in the data protection bill, and these include the data principal, data fiduciary, and data processor. Now, data principal simply means the natural person to whom the personal data relates. For example, if any individual is using an online application on his or her phone, then he or she is considered to be the data principal. That is, it is his or her personal data. Second is the data fiduciary, and it refers to any person, which can also include the state, that is the government, a company, or any juristic entity or any individual who alone or with others determines the purpose and the means of processing of personal data. So these are basically the players who are involved in the processing of the personal data. Then the data processor refers to any person, state, company or juristic entity who processes personal data on the behalf of a data fiduciary. For example, Government of India wants the data of individuals to be processed, and for that if it has hired a data processor company, then that will be the data processor company which has been processing the personal data on behalf of the data fiduciary, that is the state or the Indian government. So these are few definitions that have been provided in the data protection bill, which include the data principal, data fiduciary and data processor. Then the next important question is, on which entities is the data protection bill applicable? So firstly, it is applicable on the government itself. Secondly, on the companies that are incorporated in India, and on foreign companies that are dealing with personal data of individuals in India. So these are the three broad categories on which the data protection bill will be applicable. Now, the next thing that the data protection bill does is that it categorizes the data. And for this, it defines the personal data as the data which pertains to characteristics, traits, or attributes of identity which can be used to identify an individual. And accordingly, the bill categorizes the data into three broad categories. First is general personal data, second is sensitive personal data, and third is critical personal data. Now, regarding the general personal data, the data localization is not required. That is, it is not compulsory on the companies to store the data in India. And for this general personal data, the bill allows personal data to be stored and processed abroad without requiring any mirror of the data or any second copy of that data in India. So this is the general personal data. However, the second category that has been defined by the data protection bill is the sensitive personal data. Now, this sensitive personal data can include the caste data, financial data, biometric data, religious or political belief related data, etc. And for such a data, data localization is required. That is, a copy has to be there in India if any foreign company is accessing that kind of data. And this sensitive personal data shall be stored only in India. And if such a data has to be processed abroad, then it has to be done only with the consent and approval of the data protection authority that has been created by the data protection bill itself. Then there is third category of data, which is known as the critical personal data. And what constitutes this critical personal data will be notified by the central government from time to time. And regarding localization, data localization is required, and both for the storage and processing of data on the servers located solely within the national borders, which means that such critical personal data can only be stored and processed within the servers that are located within the national borders or within the boundaries of India, and that cannot be taken out of the India at any cost, even with the approval of the data protection authority. So this is the kind of safeguard that has been provided for critical personal data, sensitive personal data, and also general personal data. So by categorizing the data into these three broad categories, the Government of India has tried to safeguard the data and the rights of the individuals, and at the same time it has tried to provide freedom to the companies to use the data for improving their business prospects. So it has balanced the issues of right to privacy vis-a-vis the business requirements of the companies or the corporates. Then there are certain obligations that have been put on the data fiduciaries. And we note that these are those entities which can process the personal user data. Now, what are the obligations on these data fiduciaries? So first is that processing of data will be subject to certain purpose, collection and storage limits. For this, personal data can be processed only for specific, clear and lawful purpose. Further, these data fiduciaries will have to implement security safeguards, which will include data encryption, and also will have to provide safeguards for preventing the misuse of data that they are processing. Further, these data fiduciaries will have to institute grievance redressal mechanism to address the complaints of the individuals. And also, these fiduciaries will have to create institutional mechanisms for age verification and parental consent when processing the sensitive personal data of children. Now, besides providing certain obligations on the data fiduciaries, the protection bill also provides for rights of certain individuals. So the individual users have been provided the right to obtain confirmation from the data fiduciaries on whether their personal data has been processed or not. Secondly, the right has been provided to seek correction of any inaccurate, incomplete, or out of date personal data. Further, the individual users can have their personal data transferred to any other data fiduciary in certain circumstances. Further, the bill restricts continuing disclosure of the personal data of the individuals by a fiduciary if it is no longer necessary or the consent has been withdrawn by the user. So, these are certain rights that have been provided to the individuals as far as the data protection is concerned. That is, they can obtain confirmation from the fiduciaries on whether their personal data has been processed or not. They can seek correction of inaccurate, incomplete, or out of date personal data, and also they have been provided with the right to get their data transferred to any other data fiduciary in certain circumstances. Then, what are the grounds that are provided for processing personal data? So, processing of data by the fiduciaries can only be done if the consent has been provided by the individual. Secondly, there are certain exemptions that have been provided for such consent. So, exemptions include if the data is required by the state or the government for providing benefits to the individuals. Also, such data or consent can be done away with in cases of legal proceedings. And also, the consent requirement can be done away with to respond to a medical emergency. Then, besides this, the bill also defines what constitutes a social media intermediary. And such social media intermediaries are the ones which enable online interaction between the users and allow for the sharing of information. Now, all such intermediaries which have users above a notified threshold and whose actions can impact electoral democracy or public order have certain obligations. And these obligations include voluntary user verification mechanism for all the users that are using their platforms in India. Then a data protection authority has also been set up and it will take steps to protect the interests of the individual. It will prevent misuse of personal data and also it will ensure compliance with the provisions of the data protection bill. Now, regarding the transfer of data outside India, this sensitive personal data may be transferred outside India for processing if explicitly consented by the individual and subject to certain additional conditions. So, this simply means that the sensitive personal data can be processed outside India only if explicit consent has been provided by the individual. Further, such sensitive personal data should continue to be stored in India. And certain personal data notified as critical personal data by the government can only be processed in India. That is, it cannot be taken outside or processed outside India at any cost. Then the bill also provides for sharing of non-personal data with the government. And accordingly, the central government can direct the data fiduciaries to provide it with any non-personal data or anonymized personal data for better targeting of the service. Which means that the government can, without even the consent of the users, can ask to these data fiduciaries to provide the non-personal data as well as anonymized personal data for targeting of the services. Then what are the exemptions that have been provided from the provisions of the bill? So of course we all know that exemptions will be provided only in case of security of the state. So exemptions have been provided in the interest of security of the state, public order, sovereignty and integrity of India and friendly relations with foreign states. Also, exemptions have been provided for preventing incitement to commission of any cognizable offense, prevention, investigation and prosecution of any offense, personal, domestic and journalistic purposes. And in such cases, the processing must be for specific, clear and lawful purpose. And if the provisions that have been provided under the data protection law have not been followed, they are considered to be offenses, and for that penalties have been provided in the data protection bill itself. Now, after looking at some of the provisions that have been provided under the data protection bill, let us look at some of the issues or concerns with the provision of the data protection bill. Now, the first issue or concern is regarding the issue of data localization, that is, should the data be stored in India or can it be taken outside for processing by the corporations and companies? In this regard, it is being said that the 2019 Data Protection Bill has moved away from the recommendations of B.N. Sri Krishna Committee. And this committee was constituted for providing certain recommendations related to data protection. And it had recommended for localization of the data, that is, all the user data related to the Indians should be stored and processed compulsorily in India only. However, this bill has done away with this recommendation of the B.N. Sri Krishna Committee. and now the data can also be transferred abroad. However, it has to be done with the consent of the individual. Now, although general data can be taken and processed outside India or can be processed abroad, certain restrictions have been provided regarding sensitive data and the critical personal data. Further, we note that this bill mandates the fiduciaries to give the government any non personal data. However, the bill does not explicitly define or mention about the ingredients of such non-personal data, and this can lead to or it provides scope for misutilization of such data by the government itself. That is, limited protection has been provided into the bill regarding the non-personal data which can be accessed by the government of India. And this is because it does not clearly define as to what constitutes this non-personal data. Further, the bill allows data processing without the individual's consent for reasonable purposes. Now, what this does is that this gives enough discretion to the government for surveillance activities of targeted individuals, and that will compromise the right to privacy, which has been identified as the fundamental right by the Supreme Court of India. Further, this bill dilutes individuals' control over their data, and this is because it allows the government to exempt any of its agencies from any or all the provisions of the bill. Further, we note that the bill provides that each company will have a data protection officer who will liaison with the data protection authority. Now, this may lead to conflict of interest because it will create a corporate and data protection authority nexus. Also, such kind of behavior or relationship can promote illegal ways that can be used for harnessing the data. And also, this will lead to suppression of the data frauds because of the relationship that is going to exist between the data protection officer and the data protection authority, which has been given the responsibility for implementation of the data protection bill itself. Further, the process will increase legal compliance and scrutiny for the companies by the government in unprecedented ways. This means that it provides government with a lot of power, and with this it can increase the compliance and scrutiny of the companies, and this can be considered as a tool of harassment in the hands of government for harassing the companies. And this stands against the key aspects of ease of doing business in India. Then, as far as the data protection regime is considered, the EU's general data protection rules are considered to be very important. And they provide for one important aspect, and that is known as right to be forgotten. And this simply means that once the data has been processed and used by the company, it has to be deleted. However, the 2019 Data Protection Bill does not provide for any limited processing or deletion of the data after the usage. And this provision of right to be forgotten was also mandated as a part of right to privacy under the Supreme Court's Puttaswamy judgment. Further, we note that one of the provisions of the Data Protection Bill is that government can collect your non-personal data. However, such collection of non-personal data by the government is seen as standing against the principle of limited purpose limitation, which means that the government or any entity which uses your data should only use it for limited purpose. However, once the non-personal data has been collected by the government, it can use it for any other purpose and not just use it for the specific purpose for which it has collected the non-personal data from the data fiduciaries. So these are few provisions of the data protection bill, and these are some of the issues with the provisions of the bill. And some of the points that we discuss here can be important for us from the mains examination perspective, so you should learn them. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 6 has appeared in the newspapers in the context of the ceasefire announcement between India and Pakistan at the border. And it is being said that the ceasefire announcement was possible because of the back channel or the backdoor diplomacy that happened between India and Pakistan. So it is important for us to learn about the backdoor diplomacy, what it means, what are its pros and cons, and also how such back channel diplomacy was deployed by India and Pakistan in the past and also in the present circumstances. And that can be important for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view in the topic international relations, in the topic bilateral relations. And if you look at this question that was asked in the mains examination in the year 2015, it talked about the efficacy of use of soft power for resolving the disputes between India and Pakistan. So in this context, let us look at the key aspects of backdoor diplomacy or back channel diplomacy, and also what or how the back channel diplomacy has been deployed by India and Pakistan to overcome some of the issues. Now we note that India and Pakistan have had a disputed and disturbed past, and accordingly, both the countries do not trust each other. And accordingly, they have tried to deploy back-channel diplomacy. So the back-channel diplomacy or back-channel talks are simply used to talk to each other through non-official channels to discuss and resolve the problems facing the countries. Now, as compared to back channel diplomacy, the official or the front channel diplomacy simply means that talks are held between the heads of the nations or between the leaders of the nations and also between the foreign ministries of the two countries. However, such talks do not lead to any outcome because of the public pressure and opinion, and that is why non official channels are sometimes deployed to resolve the problems between the two countries. Now, generally, such kind of diplomacy is conducted through retired foreign diplomats or neutral governments which are trusted by both the sides who are desirous of change in status quo. That is, both these nations want a change in the scenario. Further, such a diplomacy is also conducted by respected figures in public lives who are known for integrity, accuracy, and who are capable of clarity, caution, and patience and have deep knowledge of the issue. So basically, it is any kind of diplomatic channel that is established between the two countries beyond the officials of the both countries. Now, what are the benefits of deploying such a diplomacy? So firstly, it enables the would-be deal makers to test the waters. That is, it helps them to determine whether the other party is capable of negotiating in good faith or not. So such kind of diplomacy is sometimes used before exploring the real commitments between the two parties. Secondly, such kind of diplomacy can be particularly appealing to high-level leaders who are fearful of a public failure if their efforts to reach a deal collapse. And we note that there is huge amount of mistrust between India and Pakistan, and also the leaders of India and Pakistan are fearful that if talks or official talks between both the countries fail, there will be large scale public scrutiny of the efforts that are taken by both the leaders. And that is why both of them are interested in deployment of back channel diplomacy to resolve some of the issues. However, there are certain risks that are associated with such an approach. So back-channel negotiating may foster costly delays and may perpetuate the impasse they are designed to overcome. This simply means that such kind of back-channel diplomacy can be costly at times and it can further lead to delays and can perpetuate the problems that these back-channel diplomatic channels have been created to overcome. Further, they provide only temporary protection from the deal spoilers and public scrutiny. That is, they do not lead to any long-term solutions. And finally, such kind of secret negotiations can facilitate early breakthrough agreements but yield diminishing returns when relied on too frequently. This simply means that although they can be used sometimes to arrive at a breakthrough, however, they should not be used in the long run because they can become counterproductive. And the only way forward between two quarreling nations is that they should try to resolve the problems through official channels and should not rely much on the back channel diplomatic channels. Now, in this regard, the ceasefire announcement was done by India and Pakistan recently. And what all instances indicated that the back channel diplomacy was deployed for coming to or reaching the ceasefire announcement. So it is said that a joint statement was given by generals of both the countries, and also they used terms like the resolution of core issues, and such kind of effort indicated that there was coordination at diplomatic level and there was high level political approval that was given for arriving at such a solution. Further, there were many long pending issues, and accordingly, the scheduling of such delayed issues like the Indus Water Treaty talks, the granting of sports visas, and also the messages that were passed between India's Prime Minister and the Pakistan Prime Minister strengthened the rumors of back channel diplomacy being deployed between India and Pakistan. And one of the key noticeable thing was that both the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan have stayed silent on various issues and accusations between both the countries or between the people and the media of both the countries. So this shows some kind of maturity between both the countries and the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan. So these are some of the instances that highlight that this ceasefire announcement was arrived at by the use of back channel or backdoor diplomacy. Now, such back channel diplomacy has not happened for the first time between India and Pakistan. And such kind of talks were initiated by General Ziaul Haq of Pakistan and the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi through the mediation of Jordanian Crown Prince Hassan. However, these talks failed when General Ziaul Haq died in a plane crash. Further, even during the Kargil War, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee chose an unorthodox back-channel interlocutor, R.K. Mishra, who was a journalist. And such backdoor contacts were established even by the present Prime Minister of India even before he assumed the office in 2015. And in 2016, six former Pakistani High Commissioners travelled to Delhi for a track to consultation with nine former Indian High Commissioners when they met the National Security Advisor, Doval, and also various senior officials of the Ministry of External Affairs. Now, track 2 consultation simply means that any consultation or diplomatic talks that are happening between non-official members of both the countries. So these are some of the instances when back-channel diplomacy has been deployed by both the countries in the past. So what has happened that both these countries are now deploying the back-channel diplomacy? So firstly, we note that front door diplomacy is not possible because of a complex past or a complex history that India and Pakistan have had. Also recently, India accused Pakistan of the Pulwama attacks that happened in the Jammu and Kashmir. Besides this, we note that Pakistan's economic condition is not very good and there is mounting pressure on Pakistan from the Financial Action Task Force to shut down all the terrorist safe havens or face severe sanctions. And accordingly, it is important for Pakistan to engage with India through a back channel in order to avoid such economic conditions. Further, we note that India and China had a skirmish along the line of actual control in the Ladakh region in the Galwan Valley, and that led to the death of 20 Indian soldiers. So, in that context, it was said that there is a possibility of a two-front war because of the nexus between China and Pakistan, and India will have to wage a war on both the fronts, that is, both along the Pakistan border as well as along the Chinese border. So, in order to avoid the possible two-front war situation, India and Pakistan are trying to engage with each other. And we all know that it is often said that for bringing peace in Afghanistan, Pakistan has a crucial role to play. And accordingly, by establishing such back-channel diplomatic relations between India and Pakistan, India can recognize the role that Pakistan needs to play and also maneuver the role of Pakistan in bringing peace in Afghanistan. So these are some of the aspects of back-channel diplomacy, when it was deployed between India and Pakistan in the past, and why have both the countries chosen to adopt the back-channel diplomatic route for solving the issues. However, it needs to be highlighted that back-channel diplomacy can only play a temporary role. The only solution that lies between resolving the long-standing issues is to establish the front door diplomacy or to establish the diplomatic relations between two countries and discussing the issues out. With this, let's take the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 13 reads that suspicious blackout hits Iran nuclear site, and it is being said that it was attacked by the intelligence Mossad of the Israel. Now, in this context, the nuclear sites of Iran become important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And previously in the preliminary examination, questions have been asked from various international locations that have been in news, especially in the conflict zones or in political turmoil. So in this context, in the DNS of 19 March 2021, we have discussed some of the important locations that were in news and the countries in which they are located. So accordingly, Erbil, which is located in Iraq, and it has been in news due to the Kurdish movement and multiple airstrikes by NATO forces. Then Ras Tanura port is located in Saudi Arabia, and these places were attacked by drones allegedly by Iran-backed Houthi rebels. We note that there is a Cold War kind of situation that is going on between Saudi Arabia and Iran in the West Asian region. The other two locations from Saudi Arabia which were under attack include the Abqaiq and the Khurais. Then the Hodeida port is located in Yemen, and it is also a conflict zone because a Saudi-led coalition is trying to cut off the supplies in this region. Then Nagorno-Karabakh, as we all know, is located in Azerbaijan, and there has been a dispute going on in this region as well. Then Attabara is in Sudan, and it was in news because of the civil unrest that is going on there. and Arak is the nuclear facility of Iran. In this context, let us look at other nuclear facilities of Iran which are sometimes seen in the news, and they can be important for us from the preliminary examination perspective. So some of the important sites of Iran include the Arak, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, also Bushehr. So these are some of the important nuclear sites of Iran, and they should be kept in mind or should be learned from the preliminary examination perspective. Further, this editorial on page number 6 is related to the US's breach of the India's territorial waters. And the issue has been discussed in the DNS of 10th April 2021 in detail. Do go through this and learn more about the issue. So with this we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.